see, you could say people are difficult. Getting a person to the place where they're ready to invite Christ into their lifestyle is easy to do. I'm living proof of that. But you know what? This message was a powerful message, but it was also one that God had already prepared the people. I believe that the Lord knows who we need to speak to, when we need to speak to them, and the words we need to say. And that can make all the difference in the world. Nineveh went from an exceedingly wicked city to a place who repented. Now, when they put on sackcloth and ashes, and even the king of Nineveh did that, they mean business. And the man who ran from God found out that you plus God is always the majority and will always produce positive results. One man, given a second chance, who was now surrendered to God, was used by God in a mighty way. And so now Nineveh was still AWOL, but they would be always with the Lord. And that's so very important. So the results, very simple. The Ninevites, they prayed, they fasted, and God had mercy on them. Never say that the job is impossible. Never say, I can't do it. Because you plus God will produce success. Do you believe that? If God gives you a calling to do something, please do it. Because God will take your effort and do great things with it. You know, God doesn't necessarily have to call the most talented, the expert, the best at something. God likes to take ordinary people like myself, like all of you. I think we're ordinary people. But he likes to take ordinary people and use them in an extraordinary way. It's amazing what God can do in a situation. I've seen some people that, God can take and use in a great way. I remember a story I heard about a district superintendent. He was traveling, and he just picked a church to go to. And he went to this church and got there. And a young man came out to preach. And as the sermon went on, the superintendent wrote a little note to his wife. This preacher is awful. And she just wrote back, shame on him. And then he wrote back again, he's awful. He said, when did you become a critique? And so they kind of exchanged back and forth. And as the sermon went on, the people were listening, and he thought, oh boy, wouldn't want to be this guy's BS. I don't know where I would send him. So at the end, he said something to people. He said, I didn't plan on doing this, but I feel that there's some people who are struggling. And I think this message spoke to you. On which this guy later thought, this couldn't speak to anybody. It was that bad. So the guy's boring. He has no charisma. His voice doesn't have any enthusiasm. He violated every homiletic principle there is. But he said, I feel like some of you might want to come forward and pray. That the Lord will give you strength because you're going to face some difficult things in the days ahead. I like to pray with the church. Half the church came up and kneeled. And this guy just sat there. When it was over, he walked out and thanked the guy and said, nice message to be polite. Got in the car and she said, how could you tell that man a nice message when you were just basically criticizing the whole thing? He said, shame on me. He said, did I learn a lesson today? And with that he said, give me your hand, I want to pray. He said, I really would. He said, I thought that message wasn't good. But God knew that that man had a message. And somehow it spoke to those people. And I have no right to attack God's destiny. And I've learned my lesson. He said, maybe I needed, he said, I needed to be here today to hear that. With that, he got out of the car and walked back into the church and said, I'll be back. He went up to the preacher and said, can I talk to you for a minute? And with that, he told him, and he said, son, I felt the Spirit of the Lord in a powerful way give that message. And I had to type that. And forgive me for being so uppity. a big person that can do something like that. And I say this because, you know what? I don't think Jonah was such a great preacher. I think he was a guy that was open to the Lord, and the Lord can use him. I don't need to know what ability you have. I need to know what your willingness to let God use you. I leave with that thought as we prepare our hearts now for communion. And, no, not yet, we're going to be. As we have communion in the service later, I want you, when you come up this morning, to simply just ask the Lord, Lord, am I where I should be in my spiritual walk? Am I listening to your voice? You see, God speaks to people. He spoke to Jonah. He didn't listen the first time. But God didn't give up on him. And God doesn't give up on you then. So let God use you. I've been here just about 2 months ago. And I really feel, I told Bob this too, I feel that there's some days ahead for this